Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray that the peace, the mercy and the blessings of Allah be upon you. Today we're going to look at an obstacle. So this is an obstacle which makes it really hard for you to pray your salah properly. So we're going to look at this obstacle today, inshallah. We're going to look at how it hinders your salah. So we're going to understand the obstacle, and then at the end of the lesson I'm going to teach you how we can try and control this obstacle and stop the obstacle from being an obstacle. So the obstacle is your mental thought patterns. So very often you might have loads of thoughts going on in your mind which will make it difficult for you to actually concentrate. So it's quite an interesting question sometimes, because you might actually notice that sometimes it's possible for your thoughts to have an entire conversation without you. And this is obviously very interesting, because then sometimes we get so carried away with our thoughts that we think that we are our thoughts, and we just always, this is some regurgitation of thoughts, ceaselessly flowing through our mind. And it's very important to actually be aware that sometimes these thoughts, they might not actually be proper thinking. They might just be thoughts which are happening in your mind, and they may just happen by themselves, and they'll also be very transient in nature. And hopefully this is kind of some of the stuff which we've started to notice over the past couple of weeks, that when it's time to pray, we start thinking about things, and then we start thinking about things, and then we start thinking about whether we're thinking in the right way and whether we're doing it in the right way. And these things can be really, they can cause problems when you're trying to improve the way that you pray. And I'm not going to talk about it too much, because it can get a bit confusing if you keep thinking about thinking, you just end up thinking about thinking, which isn't very useful at all. So in terms of this is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we think if you have lots and lots of thoughts going, then this is a really bad thing. But essentially, it's not necessarily a very bad thing. In fact, to reassure you, what's actually very reassuring to understand is that these thoughts are what the brain does. The brain does spontaneously create thoughts. There's lots of parts of our body which just do things without us consciously doing them. So the brain can think without us consciously thinking. That's not a big thing. It's just like our body can breathe without us actually doing that. Our bodies can still breathe. Our heart beats. Our lungs, for example, expand when we breathe. Our digestive system does lots of digestion. Our respiratory system does lots of respiration, presumably. But our body, they do a lot of different things. So now, just to understand this, because we've been practicing breathing over the past couple of weeks, I want you to understand this from the breath. So, for example, right now, I want you to notice that you're breathing. Bring consciousness to the fact that you're breathing. Follow your breath in, and follow your breath out. Now, you were breathing before as well, but now, or hopefully if you've done it properly, you're more conscious of your breathing. But when I ask you to do this, there's a little bit of a problem which happens, because now you've kind of done this a few times. You might think that you know how to bring consciousness to your breathing, or that you know how you breathe, or that you know how to breathe. And then that means that you're trying to aim for a perfect way of doing it, or you're trying to do it in a certain way, which can sometimes actually make you start thinking about, okay, now it's time to breathe, let me get ready for breathing, and making sure we're doing it all right. And then if it doesn't happen right, we get a bit worried about it. So this is, again, that can be a thought pattern for your breathing. So that's why it's actually very interesting to be aware of this. It's very important to be aware of this. And just like we can breathe unconsciously, consciously, we can think unconsciously as well. We can just have those thought patterns going through your mind. Now, when we do this, when we bring awareness to these thought patterns, it's actually very important, because it's it's deeply humbling, which is what prayer is kind of also meant to be. It's a very humbling exercise, a very humbling practice that we do. And the reason humility is so important is because then we can allow ourselves to be in a state of not knowing, and we're able to actually just allow our prayer to happen. We're able to just accept reality for what it is. We're not trying to apply our personal perspective on it. We're not trying to change it in the way that we want to change it. We're just being one with reality. So this is why appreciating this flow of meditation is very important, because sometimes just the thought patterns themselves can obstruct our understanding of reality. And if reality is just the existence of Allah, knowing that Allah is there for you, and the only reason you're not understanding this is because of these thought patterns, then it's good to be aware of the thought patterns. And one more reason why it's quite important is sometimes these thought patterns, they may actually include things which actually make it hard for us to pray. For example, you might be trying to pray, but one of the thought patterns that you have which go on in your mind is that praying is very hard work, and that praying is difficult, and praying is complex, and praying is confusing. And obviously, like, it won't be that obvious in your mind all the time. You might not notice it in such clear terms. Like sometimes the plans of the devil aren't that clear. But regardless of how devilish these thoughts are, sometimes these thoughts can actually put us off the idea of praying. So we're trying to pray, but you've got a thought pattern that, oh, this is hard, this is something which I'm gonna, it's gonna be really hard work to concentrate, and then I probably won't be able to concentrate. When you can actually just stop thinking, having these ideas in your mind, you realize that praying is simply to be with reality, to be with Allah, to understand yourself, to understand what's going on. That's all that prayer actually is. So the obstacle, when it becomes exposed, we become in touch with Allah, we become aware of Allah. And when that happens, then the belief that we had before, that, oh, this is all difficult, this is complex, this is not something I can do, this is something I have to work really hard for, that all disappears, and we realize it's actually our natural state to be aware of Allah. So that's very, very powerful. So now I want to finish this with I want to give you some homework which will actually help you to be able to start noticing your kind of negative thought patterns which mess you up a little bit, and just notice them for now. And also, obviously, when they're exposed, you'll notice that they stop having much power over you. So the growth work is really important. So I know some of you have been a bit lazy with writing down the answers to the questions which you're meant to be asking yourself. So all of your prayers, you should still be asking yourself these questions, and you should be writing down the answers. For today, what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, and obviously this is going to be during a time when you're not on your phone, you're not on social media, you're not distracted, you're not eating, you're not doing anything else. And just find that time and just check in with your thoughts, and ask yourself, like, what thoughts are going on, or what are my thoughts saying at the moment? What kind of thoughts are going on? So this is the homework, to just find some time when you're not distracted and ask yourself, what's going on in my thoughts right now? And just ask yourself what's going on. And there's two questions you can ask yourself. One is, are my thoughts useful? So you can ask yourself that. Are the thoughts which I'm having at the moment, is there any use to them, or are they useless? And how do these thoughts behave? And by asking these, you'll have a good awareness of what these kind of meditations are, what these cycles are, what these maybe limiting beliefs are which you have going on. And the next time when you come to pray, and these limiting belief comes that, oh, it's hard work to pray, or I can't concentrate for praying, you'll just be able to notice that's just something which has been programmed into you. Maybe it happened while you were younger, and then you'll be able to notice it, and then you'll be able to just take a step back and realize that praying is simply for you to open yourself up to reality, to get rid of these obstacles and become one with Allah, one with reality who's always there. It's not like you're not trying to do like sometimes we think that we have to do some really hard spiritual, hard concentration praying for like 37 days in a row, and then after that you suddenly have some spiritual awakening. But in reality, like, Allah's always there. So even if you just go and try praying a little bit, you'd be able to still become just as aware of Allah as you would if you put loads of hard work into it. So I think just bring aware of that. And again, really, I want you to answer that question. So what's going on in my thoughts right now? Are my thoughts useful? And what's the last question? I've forgotten what the last question is. The last question, how do they behave? So asking yourself, what's going on right now in my thoughts? Are my thoughts useful? How do they behave? And writing down the answers when you get that chance. So when you have that moment, when you're not obsessed with what's going on social media, when you're not worrying about everything that you worry about, when you find a moment like that, just think, what are the thoughts which are going through your mind? And then ask yourself, what are these thoughts? Write them down. And then answer the question, are they useful? Is the stuff you've written down, is there any use to them? And how do these thoughts generally tend to behave? So I hope that you are able, and that Allah gives you the ability to actually write down the answer. And when you start writing stuff down, you'll realize that you feel like helping other people as well. And you become just much more aware of yourself and what's actually going on with yourself. So I definitely make sure you do the homework, make sure you write it down, and start sharing your insights as much as you can. Obviously, you'll only feel comfortable sharing your insights when you're comfortable with the insights. So if you spend 2 weeks, obviously we've had 2 weeks, this is the 5th video. So hopefully you've had time to actually start writing stuff down. You've got a notebook, you're journaling, and then some of the stuff that comes up, you'll notice, wow, this is really interesting, and I think it will help other people as well. So I look forward to seeing your comments in the video, your comments on the WhatsApp group. And it's really important to be able to, notice what is going on and how that's helping you and how that will help other people as well. So that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.